Hello and welcome back to another session of Therapy and Panels. Every great superhero has an origin story. Bitten by a radioactive spider, witnessed a crime and vowed revenge, trained in the shadows for decades. But what if you were just a big old blue goofball who just walked into the city one day and decided to become one? Well, that's where today's story comes in with The Tick. Back in 1986, a young cartoonist named Ben Edlund created The Tick originally as the mascot for a newsletter at the comic book store he went to in Boston, Massachusetts. He then began to create stories for the character, starting with a 3-page story in New England Comics Newsletter issue 14, in which the hero escapes from a mental institution. The character became popular enough for the story to finance a black and white comic series, and has become big enough to have cartoons, toys, and at least 2 live-action shows. So let's just see how big of a character this big old bug became as we take a look at The Tick, issue number 1. The cover is just meh, with a black background and the Tick standing in front of it with that goofy smile, wearing an old viewfinder around his neck. Not the best cover I've ever seen. Also, just a little heads up, my copy of the book is the black and white version, but I could only find clean scans of the colored version of the issue. We begin the story with the Tick in solitary confinement, as all great origins should start. He has apparently spent the last 2 months there, but out of boredom he escapes and heads out to I'm assuming New York, as he claims that destiny is calling him to become a superhero. He jumps off the rooftop, and as such, you would expect something like a cool superhero landing, but he just crash lands on another rooftop. He then begins to start searching through an old viewfinder, his secret crime viewfinder, but he just ends up just looking at dinosaurs. Yeah, if it isn't obvious already, the Tick is kind of insane. His weight causes the roof to cave in, and he falls into the apartment building currently occupied by ninjas interrogating an old man. He notices them and thinks to himself about how much he can't stand ninjas. Well, guess that means we'll never get that Tick and Ninja Turtles crossover. The ninjas attempt to kill him, but he is unfazed, and declaring that more crime is afoot out in the city, jumps out the window, much to everyone's confusion. Okay, guess we'll continue with the interrogation. The Tick attempts to bounce off a flagpole, but it instantly breaks, leaving him to fall down to the pavement, much to the shock of this homeless man. As the homeless man talks with the Tick, we learn he has no idea about himself outside of saying that he's a superhero, while in the background you see the ninjas trying to follow his lead, but more than likely getting severely injured in the process. During the conversation, the Tick gets very offended when the man asks if he is some kind of roach. I'll have you know that my mother was killed by a roach, sir. He quickly changes the subject when the man then realizes he is the escaped mental patient from a few weeks back. When he then tries to ask why he is in the blue, the ninjas return and get handled easily by the oblivious superhero, wishing to find some crime to fight. We then cut to a nice homage to the Nighthawk's painting, as the people inside question how the Tick is, well, a tick, by asking questions like if he sucks blood, which he then threatens to do with a straw. The guy working calms him down, but the Tick passes out due to breathing through the straw, causing lack of oxygen in him. Oh. Okay. When he comes to, he is in a black room with a light at the end, believing he was eaten by a whale. The obvious first thought that comes to mind. Unknown to him, however, and others, he is on the subway track noticed by a man who looks very similar to the Man of Steel, trying to find a way to change and save the Tick before the train arrives. The man just decides to screw it with the secret identity and runs to save him, but when he gets close to him, the Tick confuses him for an enzyme, and the two begin to scuffle. As the two argue, the train arrives and runs them over, but of course, both of them being invulnerable, they are fine. But much to the unknown superhero, whose secret identity is named Clark Oppenheimer's frustration, is now late for work, and annoyed with the tick, just runs off, leaving his hat with a very confused tick, ending the issue. And that was the first issue of the tick. And for my final thoughts, this is an insane origin issue, and I loved it. This is such a goofy and insane nonsense type of story. I feel like I'm watching some old-timey things like Ren and Stimpy, or some like Smiling Friends nowadays. And I am personally a fan of that kind of crazy humor. And the obliviousness of our hero makes things around him even more entertaining to read. I actually want to try and find more issues of this to read. And that is the end of today's session. I'd like to thank you all for attending another session of Therapy and Panels. If you liked the video, please be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, I am the Super Guru, stating to all of you do-gooders out there, Spoon!